Well, thank you again. It's really lovely to be here. I'll introduce myself, and then I guess, Susan, do you want to say a couple of words about your involvement? And then Susan and I are going to take it in turns a bit, and we've got a bit of a webinar plan that we'll show you. So I'm Emma Gray. I'm a Director of Research at the MS Society and have been at the MS Society for just over 13 years. And this project has been a long time coming, so it'd be really nice to talk you through the history, why we're doing it, where we've got to, and what our future thinking is. Susan, do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Susan Scott. I'm a patient representative on the Octopus Trial Management Group. I've had MS for more than 20 years, but I was very fortunate to be really effectively treated early on. So I'm in very good shape. And I really want to see the same opportunities for people with progressive MS. I happen to be a scientist as well, and I've worked uh, in the pharmaceutical industry in clinical drug development and scientific communications all my career. So I have a sort of two-pronged interest in the Octopus trial, and it's lovely to be able to talk to you about it.
Thanks, Susan. It's amazing to work with Susan, I have to say. Really, really helpful. And you'll hear her experience later on. Okay, so the plan for today is I'll just try and give a little bit of context of the MS Society and the MS community, so where we were and where we've been, a bit about Octopus and its development and progress, and then I'm going to hand over to Susan, and then I'll talk a little bit about Octopus sustainability and the future, which is, I guess, the tricky bit, and then discuss some of the lessons learned, and then we can just open it up for discussion if anyone's got any sort of questions or anything like that. Does that sound okay for everyone? And then, okay. So, just for those of you that don't know us, MS Society, the leading UK charity to support everyone affected by MS. I guess probably considered a medium-sized charity. Our annual income is around 30 million, and we spend between 6 and 7 million of that on research. So we're a broad-based organisation that does services, support lots of other things as well. So not just funding research. You can see our vision and mission. I won't read that to you. And this is our strategy, which we're currently refreshing at the moment, but that's kind of us. We've been funding research, for 60 odd. We were started in 1953 and been funding research from 1956. So I'd say we have a fairly well-developed research program. So we fund kind of every type of research and also try and novel and innovative approaches to new grant types or new initiatives, often very much done with the community of people affected by MS as well as the research community. So we operate very collaborative. We're not a funder that just kind of gives money and then you don't see us again. We shape a lot of the research and direct a lot of the research with the community, which I think has kind of served us really well. So really what this project about is the huge unmet need in multiple sclerosis treatment is the treatment of essentially progressive MS. So in MS, people are often diagnosed with a relapsing form of MS where the immune system causes damage. You get kind of relapses or attacks. Without going into too much detail, essentially, there are a lot of effective treatments out there now that can manage those relapses and can kind of manage that kind of autoimmunity. So people diagnosed today, given early effective treatment, a lot of people can live quite well. But there are over half of the people living with MS in the UK. So it's about 150,000 people in the UK with MS. Over half of those will have what we call a progressive form of MS. So that's people that the immune damage is happening, but what's the main kind of characteristic is neurodegeneration. So people are experiencing nerve damage, nerve loss, which causes essentially permanent disability. So the same as what you'd see in, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, something like that, you'd see disability. And it's those people that don't... Hello? Oh, so that's another question. Yes, it is those people that don't have access to a range of treatments that can slow their disability progression. There's some symptom management treatments that are great. There are treatments for some of the people with progressive MS, but largely this is an untreated population who really can really have extreme difficulties, unable to walk, talk, stop work, ultimately end up in a bed in some cases. So it's really, it was a huge unmet need. And it really was our community saying to us, look, there's been loads of success in relapsing MS. The pharmaceutical industry has done a fantastic job in treating it. What about us? We're just forgotten. we don't see our neurologists, we have no treatments, what are you going to do about it? So I think that really was the steer from our community, this unmet need of progressive MS. So we thought about it at the MS Society, and really what we want to get to the point is where everyone with MS has access to effective treatments to slow or stop, or even one day reverse their disability. Obviously, we're not there yet scientifically, but our goal really much is to find treatments for everyone. And so we had to think about that outcome and then kind of work backwards. Well, how do you get new treatments for people? Okay, you need clinical trials. Clinical trials take ages, they're really expensive. And what we do have in the MS community is a really highly collaborative community, basic scientists working with clinical scientists, lots of collaboration, lots of basic science going on that's great. There's some kind of biological characteristics of MS in terms of some of its processes that are potentially more treatable than other classical neurodegenerative conditions. So without going into that detail, there is kind of a window of opportunity around remyelination. Anyway, so we have all these kind of bits, but what we didn't have was the structures to bring it all together and clinical trial infrastructure to be able to do that. So that's when we thought, right, well, actually what we need to do is to basically copy what they've done in cancer, and then what you saw through the COVID pandemic of these kind of large-scale adaptive multi-arm, multi-stage trials. There's lots of different adaptive type designs and ways of having efficient design. We ended up with the multi-arm, multi-stage one, but that's kind of the irrelevant bit. It was the point that we've got to do this faster, we've got to do this more cheaply. We can't just wait around for the two-arm studies just to keep reporting out. So that's what we did. We set about to do that, and then thinking about all the treatment pipeline on the left. I mean, this is all kind of jargony stuff in there, but it's basically to say there's all this stuff that we know could go into the trial, lessons we could learn from the trial can go back to the basic scientists, back into that treatment pipeline. And we wanted to develop studies and answer questions beyond just drug evaluation, thinking about outcome measures. There's lots you can benefit from these research platforms. So that was our vision. We thought that's the way we should do it in MS. We wanted to learn from the cancer field and kind of emulate that, but in neurodegeneration, essentially. I won't go into this detail of this slide, but we knew we had all the pieces there. We had a really kind of efficient, collaborative, multidisciplinary clinical trials network chaired by Professor Sue Pavitt on the right. And the network was able to bring the community together to deliver lots of different trials for progressive MS in different guises, one multi-arm, one large scale, all the different elements you'd need to show that you could run a multi-arm, multi-stage, large-scale adaptive trial. So we had all the bits in place. What we didn't have at the MSIT was the money. So we have, as I said, we spend about £6 to £7 million on MS research. Back when this was first being planned, 2013, 14, 15, we spent about 3 or 4 million. So there had to be a step change, I guess, in the risk appetite of our trustees in terms of the things we fund. It can be high risk, high reward, but also to invest a larger amount in MS research. So we embarked on a really big fundraising campaign called the Stop MS Appeal, which enabled us to kind of take the risk and fund larger scale clinical trials than we've ever been able to do. So really that kind of risk appetite from the trustees enabled this to happen. We had all the ideas and the people, but we needed the yes from the MS Society to do it. So that was fantastic that we were able to get that. And the fundraising teams have had to scale up, their workforce, but have worked really, really hard to enable us to do that. The ambition was to raise 100 million over 10 years. The appeal was in the last year and we're at 90 million. So we're all pretty delighted with that. And I think it's just enabled like I said, the ambition to be able to go for big projects. And I think, if they don't work out, that's fine. We have to take these big steps. So to design Octopus, which is our trial, we pulled together an expert consortium for progression and MS clinical trials. So we brought together 60 odd experts from across different fields, different disciplines, basic scientists, clinicians, people with MS, everything that would be required. And we co-opted expertise in where we didn't have it to develop. We took quite a community-driven, collaborative approach to developing a clinical trial, and with the hope that actually the next generation of researchers would benefit from being part of something like this. We funded underpinning work, to enable development of a trial. So thinking about, what treatments would go in, the trial designs. We needed to pay some statisticians to do some work, thinking about infrastructure, etc. So it was a really productive period, I say, in the life of the MS Society. through like 2018, 2019, we had all these working groups. I'll show you the structure actually. I'm happy to share these slides, so I don't have to go through all the detail, but we kind of really broke it down into all the bits that you needed to do to be able to kind of develop trial platforms like this. Yeah, so it was highly productive, came up with all the bits that we needed to do. Then we asked the consortium to come up with a grant application to us, essentially, for a large multi-stage clinical trial. And that's what we got. These are the outputs from the larger pieces of work. So the treatment selection methodology, the trial design of statistics itself, and then the involvement of people affected by MS in the design of it. So what we ended up with, as I said, was a trial. I'm not going to read this out to you, but it was a large-scale trial that had a control arm plus 2 active treatments we were able to put in, quite large in terms of the recruitment numbers. I mean, some of the details of this aren't central to this discussion, but we ended up with the design of a large trial. This is kind of how it works, where you have your treatments, you have the efficiency of an interim outcome where if it's showing potentially no benefit, you can lose a drug, you can add a new drug in. And then for the arms that are effective, you add in more participants to the original number that are already there. And then you kind of basically I think you speed it up by 3 times essentially. And then you can add in future treatments. Doesn't matter, the outcome measures can be changed, the cohorts can be changed, the treatments change as and when there's new developments or you're showing lack of benefit. So it really is a really flexible design that the community can, feed into over a long period of time. So just to pull out a few bits, as I said, we had an expert consortium of, we're very open about it, get the community together to design it, underpinning work completed, program grant awarded, and then we signed it in 2021. There was some COVID delays, which I'm sure everyone's experienced in their careers. That was fun. We opened to recruitment February, March 23. Currently over about 400 participants have been randomized. So we've completed the first stage, which is where the interim analysis happens. So we're waiting for those people to progress and have their MRI scans. And then we can see the readout next year, which is really exciting. And we've started recruiting to that stage 2. Some unique bits of it is we have a registration of interest portal. So that means that people with MS can actually register themselves for the trial. And it's via our UK MS register, which kind of enables some pre-screening to happen. So it's a really efficient way for sites to get data on potential participants. And through that, actually, we've got over 3,000 people sitting there potentially eligible to go into a trial, which, recruiting on this scale is difficult, but actually the block here is not the number of participants, it's the capacity at sites, we've learned. And the portal is really interesting because you're able to see the people register and their demographics and see who then goes on to be randomized and not, and have a look at different demographics and what barriers people are facing. So it's quite a neat tool actually to look at some of the sort of EDI aspects of patient recruitment. 15 sites are open across the UK, another 6 are in preparation. I think we're going to end up with around 30 across the UK. There's biobanking built within it. Also really nice, we've got an Australian partner who they've named their extension of Octopus Platypus, don't ask. But we have a partner we're about to open up in Australia, which is really nice to make it an international program. They'll have about 10 sites internationally. As I said, we've got an innovative EDI program ongoing, and we've been able to utilize the NIHR's Associate PI scheme, so to kind of support career development for up and coming PIs interested in clinical trials. As I mentioned, we're coming up to doing that first interim analysis, and then you can see the timeline. Essentially, we'll know the answers in 2029 whether those drugs are effective. But in the meantime, you can add in new drugs. So the idea is kind of every couple of years, you're going to get a readout from this, whether it's an interim analysis or kind of the final analysis saying whether the drug, could be useful to patients or not. I'm going to hand to Susan. That was a very, very whistle-stop tour, so I apologise for that. Susan, I think I'm in control of these slides. Do you want me just to hit all the bullets? Susan, hello?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Please do
okay, I'll start. Do you want me to just, or do you want to tell me when to hit each bullet, or just
hit
the whole slide
all the bullets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
right, I'll hand over to you. And now tell me when to move slides.
Okay. So patients, as Emma said, patients have been involved as representatives in the setup of Octopus from the beginning. we had a particular role in selection of treatment. There was a treatment selection committee who were horizon scanning the literature and assessing it from a scientific point of view. But there were also patient representatives who were looking at the drug CVs which had been created from our perspective as well, in terms of were we happy with the proposed drugs as tablets, as infusions, as injections, and if they were tablets, how often had they to be taken, and did they have to be taken particularly around at set times around food. We also looked at the safety, side effects perspective, both long term and short term, and were we happy with them? And we had an overall evaluation which ranged from I'd take this drug even if it only moderately slowed the progression of my MS to I wouldn't take this drug under any circumstances. So it added into the assessment from the scientists. And we were also involved in the choice of the trial endpoints. If you've got progressive MS and you've had it for a long time, you may well be in a wheelchair and unable to walk. And the standard assessment of MS is something called the EDSS score, which ranges from 0, where you have no effects, up to 10, which is essentially death. Many trials tend to cut off at around 5.5, which is about more just as you're becoming unable to walk easily. So it wasn't going to be any use if we had that cutoff. So we are very pleased that we have allowed patients in up to an EDSS score of 8. Actually, I'm now talking about the trial entry criteria, but that is an important feature. The other thing about being unable to walk is that if you're measuring your treatment effect using EDSS and you can't walk, then that's not helpful. So we also have something called a 9-hole peg test, which means that you're putting in pegs into a board, so using your hands and your arms. And that's, if you can't walk, to be able to have your upper body still effective is enormously important. Another aspect of the trial entry criteria is that people with progressive MS have often had it a long time, and so then naturally enough, they're going to be older. And again, trials often cut off at around 50 or 55 years as an upper limit. Well, that wasn't going to be much use. So we're very pleased that we actually have an upper limit of 70. And we were involved in that as well. Emma has mentioned the self-registration portal, and we've had as patients, we've had a lot to do with that. And it's certainly made a huge amount of difference because so many patients with progressive MS no longer even see their neurologists because there isn't anything that can be done for them in a fundamental way. They just tend to receive symptomatic treatments from their GP or their MS nurse. So having that self-registration portal where people can actually take some control and show that they're interested in being on a clinical trial has been enormously helpful, and from the trial perspective, and brings a sense of control as well. Another aspect that we had involvement in is if you're assigned to a drug which turns out to be ineffective and is dropped from the trial, does that mean that you have had your chance and that's it? Well, we worked with the statisticians who've enabled it to be that if you're assigned to an ineffective drug, you can be offered the chance to be re-randomized to the trial after an appropriate washout period. So all of those aspects have had a lot of input from patients. Obviously, we've also been involved in the lay summary for the grant application and the patient-informed consent language, but those are not so fundamental as the other aspects that I've been through. In terms of the trial conduct, we still have patients involved in the treatment selection committee, which is ongoing all the time, scanning the literature and coming up with a long and a short list of drugs and other treatments that might be entered into the trial in future. And we have a very strong input into the ongoing communications with people who are on the register in terms of frequency and what we should be talking about and what they want to hear, and maintaining the frequently asked questions as well. And particularly the communications is becoming particularly important at the moment as we move from stage 1 into stage 2, and then next year hopefully introducing further treatments onto into the Octopus platform. So those are really important sorts of topics for communications. And Emma's already mentioned the Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity Initiative. So if you could switch on, Emma, and click again. Yeah, so this is the sort of ongoing governance of Octopus, and a complicated set of committees and management groups and oversight committees. But as you can see from the yellow starbursts, we have patients involved in many of those committees. I sit on the trial management group and also on the MS register and the communications coordination group. And others sit on the trial steering committee and the oversight and management committee and the treatment advisory committee. And then when we get sticky, contentious problems, we have what we call a PPI forum, so a patient public initiative forum, where there are a lot more people who with lived experience of MS who and little knowledge of Octopus, but can give us some perspectives on how they feel we should be handling particular issues, and that's really helpful. Click on, please. And then the impact of patient involvement. I mean, for Octopus, as I've gone through, we have a widened inclusion criteria. We have clinical trial endpoints that have been influenced by us and are relevant. I didn't mention we also measure fatigue and cognition, both of which are really important to people with MS. We've got treatments that are acceptable to patients, and something that I push all the time in the trial management group is that we have clinic sites as widely spread across the UK as possible. So we certainly have sites in all 4 countries of the UK, and we're always trying to spread get a broader geographical spread. And obviously we've been involved a lot in the communications. When it comes to what it means for us, there's a feeling of inclusion in the team. So having been involved for several years from the beginning, you begin to become a core member of the team, and you feel equal to the healthcare professionals that you're working with. And our opinions are sought and addressed, and that really helps, because when you switch from being a professional or a person who with self-respect and identity in their own right, and then you become a patient, you become things done to you and so on. So it really helps address those sorts of feelings of powerlessness. And then also the ability to contribute to future progress. I was so lucky to have got really good treatment for my relapsing remitting MS very early on. And I really want to see those opportunities for people with progressive MS in the future. So next slide. And again, click through the. So if you're wanting to involve patients, then the best way is to try and co-design your studies with patients and or their carers. Recruit people who want to be involved in the research. If they're interested in advocacy or social media or something, then they're probably not the people for you. But if people who want to be involved in research, they're the ones that are going to help. Provide some basic training in research methodology and common terminology. Don't expect people to already know it or to go digging around for it themselves. It helps enormously if you have some knowledge. It gives you confidence to be able to participate on equal terms. Make sure that any patients that you are involving are core team members. So invite them to the regular meetings, get the chairs to actively bring the patient members into the discussion, ask them their opinions. Particularly in the early stages when people are trying to find their feet, it really helps to have a chair who says, "What do you think?" Make necessary accommodations for accessibility, so physical, but also virtual. If people tend to nod off on a Zoom call or something, it may not be that they're bored by what you're saying, but that their fatigue is overwhelming at that point. Offer expenses and reimbursement as well, particularly for if you're asking them to meetings to face-to-face meetings and doing things for you. Many people will not accept them, those expenses, but you should always offer. And then if you've got contentious topics, get a broader focus group involved and get their opinions, because just like everybody else, we all have there's a wide selection of opinions in the patient community, just like everywhere else. So I think that's really helpful. So I'll hand back to Emma now.
Thanks, Susan. So I guess we can start discussion soon, but the next few slides, I guess, I'm just going to treat as my therapy. So I'm just going to tell you all the problems and how difficult it is long term for these projects, and then maybe that could be a good point of discussion. So some things to bear in mind of projects like these are very, very expensive. You can see here the current investment. It's an 8-year programme grant we awarded to UCL for £13 million. That is a massive grant for the UK MS Society. I mean, that's the biggest grant we've ever given. We have to manage that. We have to monitor it. We have to do all the things associated with it. So these things are huge, plus all the additional relationships that need to be managed. So we have to think about, it's highly unlikely the trustees are going to give us £13 million again. So we need to make these projects financially sustainable for the future. It's been fantastic to start it off. We're going to have whatever happens, we're going to have a great trial with testing 2 drugs that look really promising for progressive MS. Great outcome. But actually it would be a real shame for these platforms not to continue to be able to answer other research questions as well. So things you have to think about is how you would add in future arms, how you horizon scan the treatment pipeline. You need to make a process. We have an independent treatment advisory committee to do that. And they make a scientific review recommendation. Then the trial management group themselves would have to make a decision based on scientific, operation, financial considerations. There's things to consider in here about access to that drug. So it's worth bearing in mind that Octopus itself has started with off-patent repurposed drugs. But it's not limited to that. But you do have to think about, how people get it at the end of the day before you put in a really exciting drug. Thinking about some funding, we're working at the moment with our kind of international MS Society, so our sister organisations across the globe, to work out whether we could turn this into a global platform. I've told you that Australia have come on board financially as well. But could we broaden that out? We've got other big MS societies in America, Canada, Italy, Australia. Oh God, I've completely forgotten all the my partners. Anyway, lots of them. So could we all become? Could we do this as a funding consortium? This is a slide I shared then with the details of how it would work, where we'd oversee all the governance, but they would be kind of strategically leading it with us. We've started talking to industry as well, because obviously these platforms are perfect. You could add in a novel agent; it doesn't have to be a repurposed agent. It's tricky. They're interested in principle. We've had some good early engagement in the range of companies. Maybe this lends itself better to smaller companies. Different partnerships models are being scoped, but I think we need a better understanding of the utility of these kind of platforms. So why would industry be interested in collaborating with us beyond drug evaluation, and need to understand really what the assets industry pipeline is. So it's a very last quick slide to say partnership is vital for these things. These sorts of designs are not an easy route. While I think they're vital tools and platforms to develop, they're not easy to do. It's really important the whole way through to be transparent and inclusive with all your stakeholders and all your partners, and set really clear expectations of what you're trying to achieve. I mean, this is a massive kind of investment, not just financially for the MS Society, but time from the people with MS and MS researchers. It has revolutionized kind of, I think, MS research in terms of its level of collaboration, and everyone's talking about Octopus and what can go in, what could do this, what could we develop. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think sometimes we get a bit stuck there. You don't have to bring every single person in the community with you, but you need enough people because the community have to deliver this stuff. As a funder, you really have to be flexible and understand the realities of trial design of these types of trials. They will never run to time. They will never run to budget. You have to be flexible in your approach. Otherwise, an adaptive trial can never happen. Lots of expectation management to have. As I said before, has to be more than a trial, more than just answering a drug question to maximize its benefit. And financial sustainability is really hard. It's something that kind of keeps me up at night at the moment, if I'm honest. Okay, I'm going to stop there, Sonia. I've got slightly over time, but that was a lot to cover. I hope that was useful.